you can tell that Halloween's right around the corner. And it's not just because of the tricks and the kind of the ominous, witches in the sky and bats and jack-o'-lanterns and ghouls. It's because we're getting back into the weird Arthur episodes. Arthur episodes are weird again.
So that was your beyond the leaves turning orange, the pumpkins on people's stoops, the scary TikToks and all that, the makeup challenges and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was this 15-year-old Arthur episode being strange.
Yes,
that led you to remember.
I said, by golly, it truly is. I thought they were going to cancel Halloween. It turns out you can't. Halloween's more than just a day, Will. It's an idea. It's a state of mind. And by golly, Halloween lives on. And by living on, I mean this Arthur episode from 15 years ago was odd.
You better believe it. I was reminded that it was Halloween because of some of your Letterboxd reviews. Yeah,
I've been trying to all year long. I'm a big vibe-based movie watcher, Will. In the summertime, I like to watch things with the summer vibe. In the wintertime, I like to watch things with a winter vibe. And one of the kind of unfortunate side effects of being a vibes-based movie aficionado is that I have a very limited time where I can watch horror movies. Because I'm like, I gotta wait for the spooky season.
So you restrict yourself outside of like the fall and October?
Not really. But okay. I'll watch horror movies year round. I mean, there's horror movies for the whole year, Will. Like, for instance, I would not watch My Bloody Valentine during the Halloween season. That's strictly a Valentine's Day movie.
Of course.
That being said, I really wanted to indulge in the more seasonally appropriate fare. So I've been trying to only watch kind of Halloween adjacent movies thus far this October, and it's been a lot of fun.
I mean, yeah, it's really cool to see. I mean, that's what I like Letterboxd for. But I was very happy to see favorable reviews for some of my favorite Halloween movies, like Halloween and its recent sequel.
Yeah.
Halloween 3 as well, and Day of the Dead, which is also my favorite of the Dead movie.
Day of the Dead
seems to be yours too.
People do not talk enough about how insane that movie is.
It goes places, man.
That movie is an overacting showcase. I was having an absolute blast listening to all these people scream at each other.
Colonel Rhodes, this is one of my favorite useless facts out there. The guy who played Colonel Rhodes has really not been in a whole bunch of other movies, which is a shame. I love him.
I know, he's kind of like a bizarro Ray Liotta.
A little bit, I can see that. He is the voice of the Digimon Metal Greymon in the first season of Digimon.
Whoa! Okay.
Of all of the roles, it's like one of the least. Like, I don't remember Metal Greymon saying 2 words other than his own name. So, what a waste for him. But yes, big fan of that one. It's very... We rewatched it a month or two ago, and because it was on Tubi, and it was a real quarantine watch.
It makes sense, right? Being quarantined up. That's also, I would say, thematically appropriate. But no, yeah, I think the next one I'm going to watch is, you ever see From Beyond?
No, like, I've heard. I know what you're talking about, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's the next one on the docket. I think it's from the guys who made Reanimator.
Oh,
and it's about they stimulate someone's pineal glands so much they turn into a crazy monster.
Yes, definitely heard of it before, and I'll be looking forward to more of your reviews there on Letterboxd. In case anybody wants to check out our Letterboxd, Lucas, yours
it's in my Twitter bio. Just go look up Lucas Mancini on Twitter, Lucas _ Mancini, and then you can catch it in the Twitter bio while you're there.
And I am also William Y on Letterboxd. But this, I mean, contrary to popular belief, this is not a movie podcast. Not all the time. This is a episodic Arthur podcast. It's called Elwood City Limits. My name's Will Young, and Lucas Mancini is my co-host. Speaking of watching things, Lucas, did you get a chance to see the new Arthur short that was put out just about a week or two ago?
What did it entail?
So it was all about how Muffy had to be educated by her friend Francine into wearing a mask.
Oh, I don't think I saw this.
Oh, so that's one you can find on all of Arthur's social media. They're very good about putting it out there and making it public, and we try our best to also give it some reach as well. It was very good. It was very much in a non-confrontational kind of way, reminding kids who would be watching Arthur, younger kids, why wearing a mask is important. And at the end, we get to see that both Muffy and her father are not mask truthers. They have adopted the mask, so don't worry too much about them. And it's one of these great little shorts that they've been doing this year. Of course, while their schedule is a little bit disrupted, and it's been, I think, at least I hope, it's been helpful for kids, and also it's helpful for somebody like me to just be like, man, I'm glad we're doing a podcast about this show that has people's health and safety in mind.
It got me thinking not to spend too much time on this whole Corona thing, because I know some people, we escape to podcast land away from the doldrums of the day-to-day. But that being said, I was thinking about the other day about, like, what do you think within the next 3 years or so, because you're already starting to see with TV shows, which have a way shorter production pipeline, our kind of current reality being reflected in media, right? Like in ads specifically, everyone's got masks on. It's a post-COVID world in ads. And I'm sure like fictional TV shows are going to soon be following suit, where if anything takes place in current day, everyone's going to be wearing masks. But do you think that we're going to see like full CGI animated features that take place in current day, where we're living in like mask world, post-corona mask world? I was thinking about the other day, because like often Pixar movies and stuff like that, they take place in current day. You know, you're in what's that movie called? Inside or whatever, the one with the emotions.
Inside
Inside
Out.
Out, exactly. Is that tier of movie going to end up having a world where like everybody's wearing masks in public and stuff?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I would kind of trend towards not really, because I feel like a lot of people would want. I feel like escapism is going to sell in terms of trying to get away from this thing. Now, I do think that there will be, at some point, when we're kind of back to a fuller production schedule of movies and TV and all that kind of stuff, there's going to be a lot of like live action. I'm thinking like, lo-fi kind of comedies, drama series about the pandemic, about this kind of new culture. It's going to happen, man, and I really think so. But in terms of animation, I think that probably what I foresee happening is that you get, a new cartoon that's being made the next couple of years for like Cartoon Network or, like a Craig of the Creek type show. And then you might have the characters casually still wearing masks, because I feel like masks aren't going to go away. It's going to be like, it's going to be a country like Japan where they have, or other countries that have, mask wearing is just part of the culture. Some people are, just want to be extra careful. And so I think that's going to be looked at a lot more favorably as we go forward here. And it will be represented in some way in cartoons, but I wouldn't say it would be the main feature. Like, I feel... Well,
that's more, I don't think... I'm not talking about like a CGI movie about coronavirus, but that's you kind of answer my question, and that, like, will the world kind of adjust in a way... I guess this is less a question about animation and more a question about kind of mass in general, in that, like, where will we have that cultural shift? Because when you think about the production time for, like, a CGI feature, it's like, what, 4 years? Maybe more? I don't really know much about this.
It's a long time. It's a number of years.
Yeah, so I suppose it's more a question about what's the world going to look like, 4, 3, 5 years from now. And it's an interesting thing that we probably won't know until we get there.
Yeah, and I actually kind of do look forward to see how this period of time is represented by our media.
I've often said that, I can't wait until we get these, we have all these like lovingly nostalgic recreations of the 80s in media. I can't wait till we get to, sitcoms talking about like, remember in 2014 when everyone was wearing Coney t-shirts? I can't wait till my generation ages up to the point where the media gatekeepers are all trying to appeal to me and my nostalgia.
Oh, yeah. The Coney 2012 t-shirts are going to be like the Vote for Dukakis shirt.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
That's a good call, though. So definitely check out this new Arthur short. I think they usually upload it on their Facebook, their Twitter, and I believe Arthur also has an official YouTube, so you can probably find it there as well. All right, let's. We've had a couple of emails that have come in here in the 2 weeks since we've been away from ECL. So let's take a look here. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com. One of them comes from loyal listener LionDogZXA. Been a while since they've emailed, and they wanted to point out a detail from a previous episode. So in the Family Fortune episode, which was the Antiques Roadshow knockoff, Buster shows off a hockey card with Jacques Nettoyer on it. This is a reference to the Arthur book Arthur and the Goalie Ghost, a book where Buster receives visions of the late Jacques Nettoyer that helps him play hockey.
What? And this never became an episode?
I know. Like we've been waiting for Arthur to get weird. That sounds plenty weird to me, man.
No, not only is it Halloween appropriate because there's a ghost, it's also well within our wheelhouse as Canadians because there's a goalie.
Yeah, and most likely a French Canadian goalie at that. So a little bit close to home. Man, I'm gonna get my hands on Arthur and the Goalie Ghost. That sounds like something that you might find in a thrift store if you're eagle-eyed, let's say. Moving on to the unfinished episode, I appreciated how this episode might have predicted the advent of lost media, with Arthur reaching out to users on a message board to track down the book. I also loved the book 93 Million Miles in a Balloon and actually wish it was a real book. One detail that got a chuckle out of me was that it was the extravagant wording used for the book. It reminded me of my recent reading of Sherlock Holmes stories. Also, don't worry, Will, I like Back to the Future Part 3 too. Thank you. Finally, with the popularity of Clone High, who would win in a fight, Binky or JFK? Thanks for the podcast. Well, I mean, Lucas, are you much for Clone High?
I've seen Clone High, and I've especially, of course, been inundated with the memes now that it's coming back amongst the Zoomers on TikTok and stuff.
Which has been very pleasing, I must say.
I will say that probably JFK would win, because Binky, as we've seen time and time again, actually isn't much in a fight when it comes to fighting someone his own size or bigger than him. The only times we've actually ever seen him beat somebody up was when he punched Arthur. We haven't actually seen him roughhouse many people said. Whereas JFK is like a literal sociopath in Clone High. And he's basically
a grown man at that point,
yeah.
So it's a little unfair.
Yeah, I would say that my money's on JFK. Though I bet Binky could outsmart JFK in a game of wits.
Potentially, and at least he has the backup.
Exactly.
I don't think
nobody likes JFK, whereas Binky is beloved by his peers.
Right. And another one here from Christine Wong, another one of our patrons. And Christine says, "Hello. Hope you're not too smug in your Atlantic bubble." Well, not yet.
Oh no, the Atlantic bubble just burst, Christine. Didn't you hear? New Brunswick has 13 cases, which I'm sure that's astronomically small to some of our listeners, but for us here, it's high drama in the Atlantic bubble.
Getting a little nervous. I love the last episode, particularly Binky versus Binky, and not just because I've also fallen off my bike and into a bush. Oh no. After spending much of spring and summer wistfully staring at riders whiz past the bike lane in front of my house, I finally got on a bike for the first time in about 15 years this past July. It has truly changed my life, since it has allowed me to get some fresh air in a totally social distance way. It's really true that you never forget how to ride a bike. Due to my inadequacy in PE class and always being the last one picked, I spent so much of my life thinking of exercise as a way to punish my body for its shortcomings. If I could go back in time, I would tell my younger self the message that was in this episode. The only person you're competing against is yourself. It doesn't matter how many more push-ups the person next to you does. You need to listen to yourself first and everyone else second. I've truly come out of the lockdown with a greater appreciation for my body and what it can do, as well as the kind of exercise I enjoy. It's totally fine if 4 days in a row I can bike up a steep hill and the next day I have to walk my bike up. It doesn't mean I'm regressing, it just means that my body needs a break. It's always important to be gentle and kind to yourself. And if you're wondering, yes, I listen to Elwood City Limits while I ride my bike around the neighborhood, so truly for every listen your podcast gets from me, there's really about 30 people who have heard a snippet or two. Thanks for producing SFW content for my rides. Well, you don't have to worry about that. We don't normally get to NSFW around here.
Well, if you're riding your bike up the hill right now, just know push harder. You can do it. You got this, Christine. Pedal to the metal. Keep on trucking. Keep your stick on the ice. You can do it. You're almost there. Oh my goodness!
You're gonna feel amazing when it's all over.
Yeah, we're pulling for you here in Radioland. Okay, and you've mounted the hill. Hooray! Congratulations! Yay! So here, just take that snippet and ensure that you play it. Make sure you have that timestamp memorized next time you have to take on that hill.
Great idea. I'm glad you took the lead on that one. Thanks, everybody, for your emails at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. And it's time to say thanks to to a valued segment of our listenership, although we love all of our listeners, our patrons at patreon.com/elwoodcitylimits. Help keep the lights on, help keep things going. We're getting closer and closer to one of our goals over on Patreon, and we really appreciate it from everybody and hope that everybody is enjoying our For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast. We're having a lot of fun making it. Want to say hello to brand new patrons, Robert Morrison and Bob Yee. And I'm going to go in reverse order here. We've got Leanne S. and John DuLong from the very start. Ian Collis, Light Relentless, Dan Mike Dawson Silva, Teresa, John Griswold, Shander Lefebvre Boaton, Emily K., Froppy, Stella, Christine Wong, one of our emailers, Joe Sue, Riley Stevens, Macy Ball, Jake Bailey, Kevin Noon, Kaylin Krogull, Caitlin Harrington, Shayna Bennett, William, Aaron DeFilippo, Kat, Sierra S., Kristen, Michaela Gibson, Rachel Pearson, Marlo Stanfield, Pretty Cool Stairs, Matt, Andrew Power, Melissa Avalez, Lily W., Yoshi, Greg Hagai, Christine Lascote, EJ Akra, Lion Dog ZXA, one of our other emailers, Lee Goldson, Owen, Michelle Sprzinski, Ursula Cat, Jolo Flo, Daniel Updegraff, Mason Bishop, Lawrence Valeria, Nicholas DeMarco. I hope I got that right. Just checking. Yes, okay. It's kind of abbreviates the name a little bit. Alistair, Mary Archambault, Hannah Kitten, Jeffrey Gao, and Allison Archambault. Once we get to a certain length, I'm probably going to have to retool the reading of all the names. Not that I don't like doing it, but we'll have to see about that. Maybe only a few names per episode. But for right now, for where it stands, we're going to read them all. So, and say a big thank you.
Now, Will, we're getting close to a Patreon goal. I am to believe that the Monster Hunter film will be in theaters.
Okay. So, I mean, listen, we've done movie reviews for the show in the past, but the thing is that Detective Pikachu and Sonic the Hedgehog were based off of cartoons.
Right. Whoa. They were based off video games that were based off that had cartoons based off them.
All right, I'm not saying no. Maybe I'll put that to a patron poll.
That's right. Wait, listen, Will, I'm nothing if not a man of the people. If we ask the people, the dear Patreon listeners, do they want to hear Will's opinion of the newest Mila Jovovich, Paul W.S. Anderson epic Monster Hunter starring Mila Jovovich? Will, I read an article the other day that they are going to put the cats in the movie. There are indeed calicos. Calicos? I don't remember. I don't play Monster Hunter. But the cats from Monster Hunter are in that movie, Will.
I tried to play Monster Hunter once and realized I did not have the patience for it, so I'm kind of useless when it comes to this.
Well, maybe you'd like it more if it had Mila Jovovich.
There is a distinct possibility. Who knows? I ended up liking both of those other movies that we saw. By the way, another reason to get our Patreon is to get our irregular movie show. Movie review show, I should say. Yeah, I guess we'll see about that. It would also be interesting to talk about our time. If that were to indeed happen, that would be my first time back at a movie theater. When is Monster Hunter coming out?
Let's take a look here. Monster
in potentially a year.
Hunter film. Let's take a look. Monster Hunter is a upcoming fantasy action thriller film. Wow, really a potpourri of genres, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, based on the Capcom video game. It is coming out December 30th, 2020. So ushering in the new year, sending out the much maligned 2020 with a bang. And that bang being Mila Jovovich's performance in Monster Hunter.
Well, it sounds like it could be a very busy holiday season, hint, hint, for our patrons over at patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. But enough of all that. Enough of Monster Hunter, enough of movies. Let's talk about Arthur here. So we are talking about, first of all, do you speak George? And we get the classic lineup. I don't think there's ever been a bigger feeling of the gang's all here than this cold open, where it's literally every main Arthur character you care about.
That's right. No, none of this DW preschool stuff. No more talking Pal and Kate. This is the OG squad, the day ones.
We recently asked on the Discord, we were talking about favorite characters, and more than a couple of these people came up. So this is as classic as it gets. So they're all on a hayride and talking about all the cool stuff that they've done together in the past as a group and how much fun they have. And even George gets in at the end, albeit still a little bit forgotten about. He's kind of running after the hayride, like, wait for me. So, but at least he's there in some form. So it really was, sans DW, everyone you care about from third grade Lakewood Elementary. So this episode is all about the kids making up different languages to speak together. I know that sometimes this is a function of siblings or close friends. Did this ring any bells for you, Lucas? Did you ever do anything like this?
No, and not to spoil kind of the trajectory of the episode, but I, like George, have dyslexia. And so if anybody tried to do this with me, much like how it works out with George, it would simply be impossible.
Yeah, we will be getting into that in just a little bit, but I was kind of curious after you said that. The first one we're introduced to is Francine and Muffy have created a new language named Ula, where basically they insert Ula. It's kind of like Ubby Dubby from Zoom, where they just insert Ula into every word. And it's like when I discovered Pig Latin in elementary, right around this time. It's just like I couldn't stop saying it, and I was so enamored with this language that was English but not English. Just a kind of funny way to do it. So Arthur and Buster a little bit frustrated with this, so they decide to create their own language called Arster Buther. Like I had to look this up because I could barely tell what Arthur was saying. And their language is where you take the last letter of a word and you put it first. So instead of radio, it's O-rady. They even have a rule for if you get a consonant next to a consonant. You add an I.
Which I will say, I am impressed with these boys coming up with like, Ula is one thing, but, oh, geez, I can't even pronounce it. How do you say their language again?
Ula or Arster Buther?
Arster Buther, let's just say Arster for short,
okay.
is fairly complicated, given that, these are 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds?
Yeah, 8-year-olds. But it is right around the time when you would be your brain would be at its most elastic and able to kind of take in new information like this. It's pretty interesting. And George kind of wants to learn how to do it. But, and immediately I caught on to George is like, I've been studying the language for the last 2 days and I still am having trouble with it. Whereas Arthur and Buster are old hands at it because they made it up. And to which I was like, kind of unfair to exclude the dyslexic kid in terms of learning a made up language, because this must be a little bit harder for him, and he does admit as much later on in the episode.
Well, I have very mild dyslexia, but things like word jumbles, anything where I'm terrible at Wheel of Fortune. That kind of thing. Anything where you don't have all the information to work with, or you have to rearrange letters, or letters are out of order. It's essentially Greek to me. It can't be done. Though we do get some great stuff here. So when they're kind of getting frustrated with George because George is having a tough time learning the language. And this is probably my favorite running gag in the episode, is that anytime anyone's speaking one of their made up languages, we get subtitles.
Yes, and which is much appreciated. After a while, Arthur Butler was a little. I feel like I'm making Arthur Butler was a little. It was a little hard to parse, and I still kind of didn't understand it. Even so, I'm glad that they did subtitle it after a while. Sue Ellen eventually joins Muffy and Francine in speaking Ula. By the way, I think we might have mentioned this before, but this is former guest of the show, Jessica Cardos, as Sue Ellen. So if you haven't listened to that interview that we did with her, that was a couple of years ago now, but it is on the main feed. You should check it out. There is a part where George is trying to commiserate with Sue Ellen of just man, these made up languages are really hard to understand. And Sue Ellen's about to talk to him, and Francine's like, "Hey, Sue Ellen, no speaking outside of Ula. Don't you know Ula la?" I appreciated that. George getting a little frustrated with all of this, so he decides to go to Brain and create a new language, and they're going to bring each other their ideas the next day. So George is cranking out the ideas at home with Wally, and eventually we get a dream sequence, and I'm guessing this is one of the weird things that kind of stimulated your brain.
Yeah, I have a note here that just says, well, first of all, so we see these tongue-twisting toads.
Yes. So it's George walking through a jungle on a safari in typical adventurer garb with Wally, and they come across the tongue twister frogs.
Yeah, and they are very large, but they're not anthropomorphic like other Arthur characters. They're actually drawn exactly like Toady, which was fun to see the continuity there. That it's literally the exact same way Toadie's drawn, just with a palette swap. And they can't stop saying tongue twisters over and over again, like seashell, seashell by the seashore.
It's kind of like that TNG episode Darmok, where they speak in kind of metaphors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
No, sorry.
maybe not.
Is that from before season 3?
No, it's kind of mid to late TNG.
Oh, my goodness.
It's one of their classics.
This is I'm really showing my ignorance here. I have no idea. Sure, and yes, Will, it is like that. But also, then George happens upon a society of tiny Georges.
Yes.
To which
the Georginis.
The Georginis, which this is I think I wrote down in my notes, this is unhinged.
It's a little out there, that's for sure.
Why are they small? Oh my god! Yeah, this. I'm looking at this frame right now. It's at 8:35, and you just see regular-sized George talking to a bunch of tiny, possibly wearing culturally insensitive garb versions of himself, and it's just a wild frame. We've been getting a lot of there was a big. This is probably not already a meme, but there was a big lull in kind of the really memeable screen caps, I feel like, the past 3 seasons or so. And now we're getting back once again into those first 3 seasons era of just look at this image and try to explain to someone without context what's going on here.
Exactly. I think it's probably the old, probably outdated adventurer trope of meeting the tribe of small people or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, it's like Willy Wonka and the
Oompa
yeah,
Loompas.
exactly. Both in the book and in the remake, where they actually show him discovering them in the jungle.
So George's dream inspires him to make a language that is all based around full body gestures and a little bit of rhythm as well. And it's kind of a neat idea, although I had the note, nobody tell George about ASL. I know that it's different enough, but I was also like, you could just learn ASL. That's an actual language.
I know, and then like a lot of times, so he's trying to propose this language to Brain, and Brain, in typical Brain fashion, it's not even that he has so much of a problem with George's language. I just feel like he just wants to poo-poo his idea and do his thing. But Brain is like, oh, well, you'd have to come up with so many individual gestures, and it's like, what if you're riding a bike? And George is like, do you talk often when you're riding your bike? But I was like, don't tell Brain about ASL either. Like, all of the problems that Brain has with George's language, you could have levied those against ASL, which was kind of odd. I was like, this episode feels like it's like a zombie movie. How nobody knows that zombies exist. This episode feels like it exists in like a reality where ASL has never existed.
Brain's a little like he goes a bit too hard here on George. He's just like, he's basically just like, that's stupid. Nobody would use that. That doesn't make any sense.
Meanwhile, and then he's like, oh, I'm gonna come up with a language based on math.
And it's just like, oh, this is classic the Brain we've come to dislike, of just like, it's like, you're stupid, I'm smart. Just like, shut up, you jerk. There's a montage of George trying to demonstrate his language to other people. He's like, shows it to DW, and she just does like the crazy head gesture of just like, okay, you don't have to call him crazy, DW.
And then he knocks over Mr. Rapper's coffee onto his papers.
Yeah, and Prunella laughs in his face. He makes a baby cry. It's a bad day for George.
Which I was like, Prunella should know better than anyone. She's got a friend who's blind and reads Braille. She should know that, like, this is legitimately how, like, some deaf people speak to one another.
Yeah, totally. Just a little strange when you kind of lay it all out like that. So George is dejected. He's at the playground, the school playground, and then Arthur and Francine get into a disagreement about whose bag is whose, but they're speaking to each other in their different languages. There is a point where, like, Buster kind of interjects himself into the argument and says, like, Francine, lay off, but it sounds like he said "you F off."
Oh my goodness.
So it was like, I had to rewind a couple times. I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the dirtiest the show's ever gotten. My goodness.
This communications breakdown here, it's almost a little bit biblical.
It's always the same.
It's getting into some Tower of Babel vibes.
Remind me?
What happened with the Tower of Babel in the Bible?
Well, I think I'm right on the tip of what you're talking about.
Well, just like,
just remind me.
Everybody was trying to build the big old tower to get to heaven, and then
of course,
and then God got mad at them or whatever, and made everybody talk different, and then that's why there's communications breakdown. The tower fell, blah blah blah. But like here, we have this illustrated in that, like, everybody's fighting over this bag, and it's just chaos. Everybody's speaking in each other's languages. Nobody's listening to one another. It's a complete communications breakdown, and which kind of brings us to the end of the episode, where the big solution is everybody wants to speak the same language. It turns out we all work together. We work better together when we can understand each other well.
That's the conclusion that George comes to. He plays mediator here and kind of stresses the fact that they all should be speaking the same language so they can get along better. Now, George initially has the idea of, like, I can teach everybody my language, and he even has like a little imagination sequence where he's like teaching it to everybody, and they've got the grass skirts on, and I'm like, okay.
So yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't actually have that big of a problem with the mini versions of George wearing the grass skirts, but for some reason, like, this part was like extra sus.
Yeah, especially when a lot of these kids are coated white. So it's just like, we didn't need to go this far, but okay.
They do kind of look like Roman Reigns' old NXT gear, though.
A little bit, yeah, I see that. George kind of looks like Jimmy Buffett with this shirt on. He's living on island time. But in his imagination, George realizes that his language is not inclusive, because he imagines seeing, like, for some reason he sees Jenna with a broken, like, her arm in a cast, or in a cast and sling. And it's just like, oh, she would be left out by this. So then he's like, you know what? Let's just all go back to speaking English. It's fine. We don't have to learn my language.
The most inclusive language of them all. English.
I mean, I appreciate that he came to that conclusion of like, oh, I can see where my language has limitations as well. But you're right. I mean, English, not necessarily the most inclusive language there is, but for the purposes of their group, it is. So
they wanted a future-proof. If this episode came out in 2020, George would be like, you know what? We should all start speaking Mandarin. I have a feeling this will come in handy down the road.
Good point. And that's the end of that story.
Like that Looper movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Or Firefly, where everybody knows Chinese and English. Now we're going to get into the second part of this episode, which I understand has quite a following. But before we do that, here's a little bit more on our following and how to follow us.
Hey everybody, it's Lucas from the Elwood City Limits podcast, and if you love ECL, there's a couple of ways to keep up with us. You could go to facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, at ECL Podcast, that's our Twitter. We take questions on Tumblr. It's elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. There is an Instagram as well, Elwood City Limits on Instagram. Of course, if you want to donate to the show and get exclusive content, whether that's our full-length commentary of the Arthur movies, our brand new bi-weekly PBS Kids review show, as well as our video game movie reviews with the Sonic movie review and Pikachu movie review, you can check out patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And that's also going to get you access to the Elwood City Limits Discord, which me and Will like to post in from time to time. And if you want that sweet, sweet Elwood City Limits merch, check out teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store. You can listen to the podcast at libsyn.com/Elwood City Limits, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and there's other podcast apps like Stitcher, and if we're not on your favorite app, let us know. And where can you let us know? Well, that's going to be at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. That's also where you can send us a question, and we'll read it on the show. Finally, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do so is to tell a friend who likes animation or Arthur or just podcasts in general, and to go to our iTunes page and rate us out of 5 stars. Apparently, that helps podcasts out. Bye, everybody!
World Girls is one that has come up before in emails, and we recently had a Twitter thread about the favorite episodes of some of our Facebook followers, our Twitter followers, even people on Tumblr and people on Instagram talking about their favorite Arthur episodes. And I did see a couple of times World Girls making its way into all-time Arthur episodes.
Yeah, I did not realize that this episode was held in such high regard. We haven't, touched back in with this for a while now, but I'm pretty confident in saying that we are firmly ahead of where I would have stopped watching Arthur. I think we're in total uncharted territory for the both of us at this point. Like, there was some episodes earlier in this season that I had probably remembered, catching on TV here and there, probably back when my sister was watching it. But I think now that we're at Do You Speak George and World Girls, I have no recollection. We're in the complete mystery zone for me. So every new episode from now on is probably going to be a total surprise, much like this one was.
Okay, so it's really, as we get close to the end of Season 10 and into Season 11, this is where we're both kind of flying blind. This is definitely one I'd never heard of. In fact, I kept confusing it with the other PBS show, Word Girl. So it's World Girls. And then we actually start off with the dolls themselves. We have a little conversation between a French world girl, a Norse world girl, and a Japanese world girl who are in kind of their own special play sets. So the French one's on the Eiffel Tower. The Norse one is in one of those... I do know the name of it, but I can't think of it right now. One of those Norse warships, I want to say. And the Japanese doll is in like a... Man, I'm just showing my ignorance here. Again, I know what this is called. Basically like a... not so much a Zen garden, but like a...
Trimming the bonsai?
Yeah, she's painting a picture, actually. But let's just say a Japanese-inspired landscape.
It's like an Edo,
kind of talking
Edo
about...
period castle, for instance.
So it turns out they're having a conversation together about... I actually don't remember what it was about.
It's who's got the better culture. It's battle of the cultures. And it's interesting to see because the French girl and the Japanese girl are so insistent The Norse girls kind of just playing mediator in terms of oh, listen, like they want to play with all of us, whatever. But the French and the Japanese are going head to head on who's got the better culture, the older culture, blah blah blah, which is interesting because not to stereotype, but in pop culture, Japanese people tend to be big fans of the French. The way that like Westerners, Ouibs, tend to be like huge fans of like Japanese culture. There's a significant people who are like in Japan who are way into like the francophone aesthetics. The French maid stuff. There's all these like anime that take place in basically fake France, fake Europe.
Would they be Ouibs?
Ooh. Well, folks, I hate to announce it's the end of the podcast. People keep asking, are we going to watch all the Arthur episodes? Well, I'm sorry. Will just canceled it for both of us with Ouibs. On web.
Les Ouibs.
Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, are you a fan of Japanese animation? Don't you know I'm from Shawinigan? I am a web. I am a notorious web. I love Attack on Titan. And I love
Attack on Titan,
Hunter x Hunter. This is silly. This is a silly
Cowboy Bebop. Carol et Tuesday. Carol et Mardi. Mars comes in like a lion.
You don't even have to change Kill la Kill.
That's true. Ooh, there you go. That's one that Chrétien could start with. Really knock him on his butt. So let's talk about world. You said it, pal. Let's talk about World Girls for a second. The episode is all about the dolls here. So I had to look this up, and thankfully I did because this completely passed me by. Not just as someone who didn't grow up playing with dolls, but someone who didn't grow up with these dolls. Actually, I guess I kind of did, but I was completely unaware of them. So they're a takeoff of the real-life American Girl line of dolls, which is basically the same idea as World Girl dolls, which is they are dolls with a certain either ethnic or national theme, because at first they were like about promoting American history and stuff, and they were sold with books about information about what time they were in or who they were. They're kind of the role in society. So they started as American historical figures, but then they went current in 1995, and they've also done other cultures I don't understand. So American Girls, I don't think it's Barbie, but it's a lucrative franchise, it seems. It has its own series of movies. It has dedicated stores, like the one in this episode. There's an American Girl magazine. There's like an online world that there is. There's even an American Girls podcast. Shout out to the American Girls podcast, which has its own Wikipedia page. So there you go.
It's funny though, because this is one of those cases where I think the Arthur one's better. And maybe it's because I'm not American, but I'm like, how many different girls could there possibly be in American history? I'm being reductive, of course, but it's just I like the concept for World Girls way more.
Mm-hmm. I think at some point American Girls did kind of branch out in the way that World Girls already is, but yeah, it is actually kind of a cool idea at its very base, and we get to kind of reckon with capitalism here in this Arthur episode, which is maybe why people have come back to it fondly. Speaking of capitalism, I also wanted to point out a lot is made in this episode about like how expensive World Girl dolls are, which is also based in reality. So this is from the Wikipedia page, and I'm guessing this is in American dollars, which would mean it would probably be even more for us. So a typical American Girl doll, Lucas, how much do you think just the doll?
Is this
no
adjusted
accessories
for inflation?
I don't know. It's Wikipedia, so I don't know what to tell you. It's probably current-ish. But
I'm gonna say
while you think about it, just hang on. Let me just Google. Let me just kind of get an idea for the price. But you think about what you think the price of just a doll is. Right, let's do
Okay.
Okay, what do you think?
I'm gonna say, because so much has been made about how expensive they are, I think maybe I'll be foolish here, but I think I'm gonna overestimate. I'm gonna say, Will, $48 for an American Girl doll.
Actual retail price. Now, again, this is a figure that I got off of doing my Wikipedia research. I'm on Walmart Canada right now. So, and I will say the price
that was 48
varies.
American. That was 48 American. So whatever that is in Canadian dollars.
So Wikipedia tells me that generally, this is probably like the average price of an American Girl doll, $115.
Ooh, ay. Will, that's a brand new AAA video game.
You better believe it. On Walmart Canada here, I'm seeing American Girl dolls that range from $85 to $75 to $70 to as much as $122. So we're kind of all over the shop with this one. And again, going back to Wikipedia, an American Girl doll that has accessories that you buy separately can cost you upwards of $600.
$600?
Not
Forget
always.
a AAA video game, Will. These kids out here buying PS5 dolls.
I know, dude. Again, if you have any interest in finding out more about American Girl dolls or anything, I would recommend you to the American Girls podcast. I'm sure they can tell you everything. But that's kind of my cursory look into the subject. So that kind of gave me a bit of context in terms of how to look at these World Girl dolls. So Muffy is one of the big parts of this episode. She has a giant collection that she's showing off to Sue Ellen. Sue Ellen is not so much interested in collecting them. She has one World Girl doll from Tibet, because of course that is where a lot of she's been there before. I believe her brother Tenzin is from Tibet, if I remember that correctly. So she's just looking for one accessory for that doll. But Muffy has an entire collection that she shows to Sue Ellen, and Sue Ellen takes exception to how Muffy has arranged them.
Yeah, she put girls from in the wrong spots. We have, I think, is it the Japanese girl she puts in the pyramids?
Cleopatra's in the sports car.
Yeah.
And Muffy is missing what Sue Ellen is saying is the central conceit of the World Girl doll, is that you get the doll and you read the book to find out more about their culture. It's not about collection. It's about why didn't I write that? Oh, it was a good line. It was not about collection.
Oh, it's about I know what you're talking about. It's not about collecting. It's about connecting. Well,
connecting. Yes. That's it. Thank you.
But Muffy also has a really good line where she goes, "World Girl isn't about right and wrong. It's about collecting."
Yeah.
Now, I thought this was interesting because I personally disagree with both of them. I think that this is an interesting scenario where this is flagrant yucking people's yums, in that, if Muffy wants to collect this room full of World Girl dolls, I mean, who's gonna stop her? Muffy's just going, she's just being like an annoying Funko Pop person, you know what I mean? Got the wall full of their books under glass, never to be opened. Whatever, though, if that's her prerogative. But she's definitely being annoying. That being said, Sue Ellen is trying to police how Muffy has fun with her dolls. And though Sue Ellen has a different appreciation for them, they're both at the end of the day, and I think this gets into a little bit some of the stuff later on with Francine in the episode about the kind of the critique of capitalism. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. They're both just giving money to the World Girl doll company. It doesn't really matter if Muffy's being historically accurate with hers, or Sue Ellen is kind of taking in all the research and all the extra materials and ensuring that her dolls are historically accurate. At the end of the day, who cares? And so that's why I was annoyed with Muffy here, because she's being an annoying collector, but I was also annoyed with Sue Ellen, because it's she's trying to police how someone else plays with their toys.
I understand where you're coming from. I think it. But unfortunately, Muffy sides with, like you said, the annoying collectors who I'm just like kind of a little bit allergic to in real life, like the people who have walls of Funko.
Oh yeah,
and I'm like,
Muffy's got big Reddit /r/Funko energy with this one.
Ugh. But I understand where you're coming from with Sue Ellen. I think it's just that she has. You're right. She has a very distinct way to enjoy these, where it's really like they're toys, so you can pretty much do whatever you want with them. I actually fell on the side of Francine.
Yes,
or
I was Team Francine on this one. I'm so happy to hear you say that because I found myself saying I'm with Francine about all this.
So as they're kind of talking about it, Francine is watching an advertisement for World Girl World. Jeez. Tongue twister.
Yeah, we got to get those frogs on it.
Yeah. So by the way, the World Girl franchise we already see has a popular toy line, book series, and now basically a theme park, which is going to be opening in Elwood City. And it's kind of like the Disney store if you also had some Disney World in there as well, or Disneyland.
It's
maybe.
like the Toys R Us that was in Times Square that had the roller coaster inside.
Yeah. Or like a Lego Land, something like that. A branded theme park type of location. So that's going to be opening up, and Muffy's very excited to go. Francine is against World Girl from the beginning, but because it is she sees it as a scheme, like basically a scheme to get rid of, like get you separated from your money, which is like she is so on the verge of baby's first capitalism here. Like she's so close to understanding.
So she calls them to watch this commercial, and the girls watch it. And they're like, "That's like amazing." And so Francine says over the phone, she goes, "That was disgusting." Like she's just repulsed by it. And then they're trying to get Francine to come with them to the World Girl grand opening. And then finally Muffy convinces her to go, and Francine's got this great line where she goes, "I'll go, but only to prove it's a scam to sell useless stuff."
Francine, the littlest leftist over here. She's able to see. It's like she's seeing outside the Matrix for the first time.
She's got class consciousness, Will.
That's it. That's the term I was looking for.
And you know what though? I didn't even think about this when we were first watching the episode, but now that we're talking about this, it kind of makes sense that Francine would be the one to come to this conclusion. Buffy, of course, part of the 1%. Buffy is pretty much like immune to class consciousness. And Sue Ellen, though much more worldly and someone who has seen many cultures across the world, her dad's a diplomat. Sue Ellen's not hurting for. She's definitely upper middle class, right? To be upper class. Her dad's probably pulling in six figures.
She's had the privilege to be able to be exposed to all these different cultures at a young age, which of course takes like money and time and all this kind of thing. Francine is the most working class of the three because she lives in an apartment with her family.
Literally a unionized sanitation worker. And they live in an apartment, and where she has to share a room with her sister. So, of course, Francine is seeing the forest for the trees here, and quite plainly saying, this whole thing's a scam.
Don't talk to Francine Frensky about hard times, baby. When you gotta live in the same room as your sister, that's hard times. when your daddy when the dump kicks him in the butt, gives him a gold watch and says a computer took your job, baby, that's hard time. So yeah, she's the real working the person from the working class here is Francine. So you're right, it does make sense for her to kind of be on this end of things. Yes, you're right. Muffy convinces Francine to come by we'll do a sleepover afterwards. Do whatever you want. So they go to this World Girl World. They overhear somebody saying,
favorite line of the episode.
It's a mother saying, "We had to take a second mortgage to come here, but it's worth it
to make the girls happy."
It's basically just a store. It must be exorbitant to get in here. Because it basically just does look like a giant store.
This episode came out in 2005?
2006.
2006? Oh my God, Will. That poor woman would have been decimated by the economic crisis in 2008. She remortgaged her house in 2006? Oh no!
All for World Girl World. You buy a ticket to go. I mean, this is all theme park. This is all theme parks. I get it, but it's literally you buy a ticket to get into a store. Like, that's what they're constantly doing, and that's what Muffy's doing throughout the episode, is she's buying every accessory and doll that she sees, just so that she can, for the sense of collection, so that she can have it all. And I was kind of, side-eyeing collecting, people who collect, but I understand that mentality. I think, for me, it's a lot in, like, video games, which is why I don't play, like, open-world games very often, because I do have an obsessive personality, so I can understand how that could relate to something that you buy instead of something.
Well, I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't looking at issues of the Japanese menswear magazine Popeye from the 1990s on eBay last night, and it's like, do I need a magazine that's all in Japanese from the 90s? Absolutely, positively not. Do I want it? Yes.
I mean, I think. And not to say for myself, I'm very financially insecure, so that always stops me from making. Like, trust me, if I had money, I would make the worst decisions with it. Like, I would just buy crap. I would just buy garbage all the time. Like, it would just not be used in the way that you should be using a great deal of wealth. At some point, they talk about going to the Model UN, which I thought was funny. So, Francine's kind of, going with Muffy. She's kind of goofing on this whole thing. It seems ridiculous. But eventually she goes to, like, the Sports Hall of Fame part of World Girls. And she discovers a doll of Babe Didrikson Zaharias, who was a real person.
Oh, I suspected as much.
I learned something today. Now, they mentioned a little bit here in the episode, she was like a multi-sport athlete and pioneered the idea of women playing golf. I looked her up very quickly. She was an Olympic gold medalist and 10-time LPGA champion. So she's the real deal. And this really speaks to Francine, which kind of goes back to what Sue Ellen was talking about. This is why this is how closer to how Sue Ellen sees these dolls should be interacted with. Francine wants to learn more about Babe Didrikson Zaharias and more about her role in the world of sports. So she's really in it for the book. And then later she admits, like, and the doll is kind of cute. So, like, it kind of ends up working on her, which, again, it's kind of framed as a positive thing, but on the other side, it's just like, yeah, that's how they get you. That's like, you see, not that I don't want more representation in brands, but at the same time, it's hard not to see it as an exercise in just widening the net for profit growths with this kind of thing.
Well, no, and this kind of gets we kind of I wasn't sure at this point of the episode. I was thinking, like, I was trying to parse out, okay, what's the subtext here? What's going on at a metatextual level? What is this episode trying to say? Like, is this an indictment of collector culture? Is this an indictment of kind of the World Girl enterprise as a whole? Because it was, yeah, like you said, kind of portrayed as a positive thing that Francine was able to see kind of herself or a important woman in history represented. But I think this is all acknowledged when the girls find themselves in the belly of the beast, in the kind of doll manufacturing line of the World Girl headquarters.
Well, and before we get there, to kind of add to what you're talking about here, there is a part where...
So this part was actually, yes, this was really, really interesting.
Yeah. So it's directly after this. Sue Ellen's trying to find the accessory for her Tibet doll. But apparently, like, she goes up to customer service, and they say that the Tibet doll has actually been discontinued.
And my first thought was, did the CCP take over World Girl? Like,
well, I mean,
or the CPC? Excuse me.
There's no definitive answer, but they do say that the person she's talking to, who just seems to be like a 9-to-5 kind of guy, just straight up admits that, like, Tibet, because it's a Buddhist country, didn't generate enough accessories, so they just discontinued it. And it's like, oh, they know what the people the writers of this episode, they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Like, this is I think is where the real focus starts to get in, of like.
And when Sue Ellen's relaying this later on, she's got a great line where she's like, now, oh no, I think the guy says this to her. He goes, now there's no Tibet in World Girl Worlds. Like, literally the country has ceased to exist.
And he even says, like, I could get you a Turkish red balloon. It's almost the same thing. You know, just conflating Turkey and Tibet together as if they're, quote, almost the same thing.
Totally different cultures.
Wild stuff. So eventually they get the tip that if, you know, some of the older dolls that have been discontinued go to the doll hospital, and you might be able to find the accessory there if they still have it lying around. At this point, Muffy's been collecting for hours, and she's got bags and bags of dolls, and she's completely tired. So they go to the doll hospital, which, by the way, must be a sweet racket. Like, there's some guy dressed up in, like, Dr. White's that comes out with, like, the doll with, like, a bandage on its arm, and it's like, man, that must be a sweet gig. They basically have to do nothing. They're just dressed up like a hospital. So they go behind the scenes, and they do eventually find the main... I found the scene interesting. So they see the assembly line for dolls, which is that basically there are being like thousands and hundreds of thousands of dolls being made every day, and they're just going to be continue to be pumped out, and they're all alongside these like different hallways that are labeled by country, and it's like stacked to the ceiling with accessories and dolls and everything to buy. And Muffy kind of breaks down a little bit here. She's just like, they keep making dolls, and I'm going to have to keep collecting them, and I'll never have them all. And it kind of breaks them all in a way. We also get a quote here. I think it's when Muffy sees a doll from Estonia, and she's like, "Where's Estonia? I've never even heard of it." Like, she's literally in tears holding one of the dolls and just like, "I can't keep buying them. This is too much."
No, and it's like you said, where this is why I think this episode's smart, because it's telling us kind of what the worldview of this episode isn't said kind of, it's not hit over our heads. It's told in a subtle way, and a lot of it is visual as well. Like, there's a lot of cool stills where, like, you see the dolls on the production line, and there's, like, this unsettling imagery where they don't have any of their, like, hair or anything on them yet, but they all have the kind of same frozen, like, smiling face on the production line. Like, all of the imagery in this part is purposefully creepy and unsettling.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I just thought of this now. Muffy's realization of, like, it will never end. Like, I will have to keep collecting forever and buying forever. It reminds me, there's a YouTuber called Crowbcat, Crowbcat, and they did a bunch of videos kind of about the video game industry. And one of them is about buying skins in Counter-Strike, and about how, like, people are getting excited about, again, kind of like a collector mentality. And then in the video, it just, like, asks the collection of, like, so when you get them all, then what? Then what do you do? And I don't want to be too harsh on people who collect things. I'm sure that there are a few of them who are our listeners, and that's cool. If you have the money and you have the means and you have the space, you can do whatever you want with that money. Yeah. That's just that's in the end how I feel about collecting, is that, like, when do I stop? And like I said earlier with my thing of, like, why I don't often play open world games is because what my version of collecting is getting everything 100%. But then, like, eventually I'm putting hours and hours into a game that I might not even like that much. And I'm like, so when does this end? Like, when can I stop? And for me, it's just like, I just have to be like, push away and be like, I have to stop now.
Yeah, like, I don't want to say that I'm also just criticizing collecting as a whole, as much as we kind of, make fun of Funko Pops or what have you. Listen, you're talking to a guy who buys Criterion movies. I could just watch the movie anywhere. Why do I gotta buy a Blu-ray disc? My God. But, I do it because I like them. I like the way they look. I like the way they look on the shelf. I like the little book they come with. I like all the little extra commentary and stuff. But I think, there's something about collecting. There's something to be said in this episode, and I think this is what makes it a great episode, is that you kind of interpret it a number of different ways, and the audience kind of brings something of themselves to the final conclusion. But I think there's something to be said about collecting for collecting's sake, and also in a kind of broader scope, production. and commerce for its own sake. And it reminded me of a conversation when they make this realization of seeing the production line, and then all the stuff that Francine was saying earlier about how it's just a scam to sell useless stuff. We had a storm a couple weeks ago here in Halifax, and I was having some friends over for the storm because we were on a better power grid and we didn't want to lose power. We were bored, so we were watching Shark Tank. And my goodness, is so much of the stuff on Shark Tank, I was like, oh my gosh, I could never be an entrepreneur or an inventor. Because I would say 99.999% of the products on Shark Tank is stuff that literally no one needs. It's like people trying to innovate. It's the old meme about like, capitalism breeds innovation or whatever. And then here's this product that like literally no one in their right mind should ever want. It's just, people trying to create things for the pure purpose of selling them without any kind of other higher purpose, right? And so there is something interesting to be gained from this episode. It's talking about, it's working on multiple levels in that, there's this commentary on, Sue Ellen is getting this value from them because there's like an educational element and she likes the history. But then also on another level, it's like, well, and Francine was getting out of it because there was like female empowerment and she was seeing some representation. But then we take another step back at this whole thing with the critical eye, and it's like, to what end is all this happening? And it's literally to make money. So I think there's something interesting to be said about, the fandom cultural in general. And like you think about things like Marvel movies, and when this is another great example. So when Francine sees the golfer, and she's like, oh, this is so great. Like, I'm seeing, like, a girl that reminds me of myself. Francine is someone who's been a little bit of a tomboy. She's an athlete. She looks up to this type of person. It's similar to, like, when Black Panther comes out, that's huge for a whole set of people that they get to see themselves represented in this big-budget superhero movie, this big kind of media release. But then we take another step back and we realize that, okay, yes, this is representation, and yes, this is important to this huge group of people, but then also at the end of the day, it is just kind of this cynical cash grab by this major corporation in Disney. And a lot of this stuff, a lot of this kind of Funko Pop tier of fandom, that's the end. When people are talking about like, oh, I watched the Avengers movies a million times, so it would be the highest grossing movie in theaters. All that ends up serving is the Disney Corporation, who doesn't care about you, right? Who would have thunk that all of this would be in this Arthur episode?
Well, I can tell you feel quite passionately about this. I mean, I don't think that's a secret, especially knowing you in real life. But this really seems to have captured your attention.
Right. Well, and that's just like how I have no idea if that was intentional. I have a feeling it is based on some of the very specific lines and imagery that are in kind of this episode. All the factory imagery from the latter half, and then kind of all of the at least lampooning the idea of this world girl world, and like the woman talking about how she had to remortgage her house. I don't think I'm pulling this out of nowhere, but I was very surprised to see kind of an Arthur episode tackle this level of subject matter. But we're not quite at the end, right? So they come to realize they have this moment where they break, and then they all go back to Muffy's place, and Muffy is kind of doing a Marie Kondo where she's going to donate over half of her World Girl collection to charity. And then they come to the realization that she has the part that Sue Ellen was looking for her Tibetan World Girl, except the color's wrong. It's historically inaccurate. And then they decide, this was kind of where the opposite lost me a little bit, is that then, much like people with that hustle mindset, starting a side gig, starting an Etsy store, they decide to kind of paint the accessories and resell them themselves. Thus getting sucked into the system of capitalism, Will.
It's I mean, hey man, we all it has its hooks in all of us. I can relate.
There's no ethical consumption, Will.
Yeah, I know. So that is kind of the end of the episode. It was like, especially, it felt like we were really like working up to something, and then we just kind of couldn't get as far as we'd like to go. But then again, I think it's I think we'll talk about it in a sec here. Let's rewind back to Do You Speak George as we kind of end off the episode here. What did you think of that one? Obviously, it kind of scratched a weird itch in your brain.
Yes. Do You Speak George was delightfully weird. What an odd topic to pick for an Arthur episode, as everybody's trying to speak these different made-up languages to one another. I thought this episode was fun. I thought it was entertaining. It was nice to see a George episode. The dream sequences were delightfully weird. The ending is absolutely one of those endings where the situation is resolved immediately. George goes, "Why don't we start speaking English?" And then everyone goes, "Yeah, good idea." And then everything's okay within like 10 seconds.
Right.
So it's very much like there's not much of a climax to this episode. It kind of gets fixed with a snap of the fingers. Some of that tribal garb stuff was a little bit sus. But all in all, I thought it was, an entertaining episode. How about yourself, Will?
I thought it was okay. I don't think it kind of struck me in the way that it struck you. You're right. Always appreciate it when Arthur gets a little kooky, a little creative, and it's definitely something that I think kids are prone to do. So, I felt like just the episode itself wasn't a whole lot to it. I felt like it was went by pretty fast. I didn't have a whole lot to say about it. Always do appreciate a George episode, though. It's not one of my favorites of his. But it's fine, and I also kind of didn't. It kind of ends weird of just like, well, let's just go back to the way it is, and just like, okay, all right. But there were little points here and there about accessibility. They were like, I appreciated the nods to accessibility here, where George realizes that like, oh, his language might not work for someone who is physically disabled, or or just talking about how, like, it's hard for him to understand languages because he's dyslexic. So I appreciate that the Arthur writers are keeping this in the front of their minds, and especially as we go forward, I'm hoping that there will be more, not just nods to accessibility, but talking about accessibility issues and all other types of social issues at the front of things. Because when you talk about social issues under the guise of Arthur, it can actually be really interesting, and that's where I'm at with World Girls. So I am curious on any listeners' kind of more deeper thoughts about World Girls and kind of what it means to them, if it is one of your favorite episodes. But for me, there's not a lot of Arthur episodes I can think of where, like, I'm still kind of thinking about it. Like, I'm still kind of processing it, because you and I both clearly had a lot to say about what this episode had to say. But it's because there are a lot of different viewpoints within the idea of, you can call it class consciousness, you can call it capitalism, you can call it fandom culture. There's a lot of views represented, and I think they're all represented pretty honestly. That none of them feel like straw man characters, or like the opinion that has to be wrong, except for maybe Muffy's. Like, in the end, Muffy's kind of reduced to tears and been like, what was it all for? But as we also see, like, they're not out of World Girls. Like, that's still a thing. It's not like we defeated it, or like it's going to stop being a factor in their lives. It clearly will be, at least for a little bit. But you get to see where those opinions come from, and this is I think that Arthur, much like kids shows, of course, and I don't begrudge them for this, is a show where it'll often tell you what the message is at the end, as it should, because it is for a younger audience. But this is the rare one where it's like, what do you think? And I was taken aback when I was watching. I'm like, what do I think? And so this is where talking about it with somebody is actually really beneficial. I mean, I like talking to you about even, the less deep Arthur episodes.
No,
but
I'll talk to you about a preschool show for babies. On PBS, that some of these shows have significantly less things to sink your teeth into than Arthur, of all things.
But yeah, this is one where I'm like, I need to talk about this with someone, and thankfully you and I we're just alike enough that we can have kind of, I guess, a civil conversation, but I hope we can both add to each other's thoughts as well.
Yeah.
So I think that, in terms of an episode, like I thought it was fine. Like a couple of good lines here and there, but really, I'm just still kind of thinking about this in terms of where my head's at 30. Which, I mean, if you've listened to this show, I feel like it's pretty self-evident how the amount of times we said capitalism and class consciousness and all this kind of stuff. Like I'm left leaning in real life, and Lucas is as well. So that's kind of the lens we're looking at it from. And I do wonder how this reached younger viewers at the time. And so I'm not ready to close the book on the conversation on this episode, and which is why I'd really like to hear from you, the listener, if you have any extended thoughts on this, and maybe we can talk about it on the next episode. But Lucas, you've also had quite a lot to say. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts in general.
So you put out a post on the Elwood City Limits social media this past week. We've been talking a lot lately about all-time great Arthur episodes, right? I gave it a good think, and my initial favorite is, of course, The Blizzard. We've talked about this before. That's always been a childhood fave of mine, and when we rewatched it delivered. But a new favorite that appeared only through us talking about it on the podcast was Grandpa Dave's Old Country Farm. And the reason I have to list it as one of my favorites is because it's one of the most brought up episodes on Elwood City Limits. Probably up there with DW getting punched in terms of the episode we bring up the most. And the reason for that is that Arthur at its most effective, I think the Arthur episodes that really, really shine and show kind of the best of what Arthur's capable of, is one where, it tackles a subject that you don't normally see in children's television. In Grandpa Dave's Country Farm, it's the wrestling with a parent aging and not being willing to come to terms with that and wanting to do everything themselves. Something that I've probably not seen in any other show aimed at 8-year-olds.
Totally.
And so, but the other thing about that episode is it does that in a way where it doesn't hit you over the head. You kind of come to the conclusion yourself. And it's funny. In World Girls, it's a very similar kind of case where the episode is so kind of not hitting you over the head that it's left, I touched on this a little bit earlier, the audience is left to kind of bring a lot of their own experience to it. There's not necessarily a hard and fast moral. And something that we've been seeing with these later seasons is that I think the show's gotten away from that a little bit, and at its worst, it's gotten a little bit after school specially, where we've really been kind of hammered over the head with how we're supposed to feel about the situation. Whereas this is just trying to, I think, this is my interpretation, is to just trying to get kids to look at this and look at consumer culture with a critical lens. At the least, that has to be intentional. We got a woman talking about how she had to remortgage her house so her kid could go to this doll theme park. So we have this critique of consumerism, which again, pretty advanced subject for an 8-year-old. And then it's presented in this way that is not, cartoonishly overt. They're not having Muffy maniacally laugh in a tub full of dollar bills, which some episodes have literally been that kind of plain spoken in what they're trying to get across. This is one where you have to kind of read between the lines a little bit, and then supplement that with it's funny. It's a funny episode. All the Francine's line in this episode are really great in the beginning. All the lines around Buffy has no idea, about the world at all. She doesn't understand, literally any other culture. All the kind of, the stuff with, Bailey the butler, poor Bailey's, walking DW around this giant complex.
Muffy.
Muffy, yeah, excuse me. And then we get, it also works for me on this level where, listen, and this is kind of the temptation of this kind of type of consumerism and collecting, is that the art is all kind of cool of seeing the dolls themselves are cool. Yeah. You could tell the animation team, the character designers, what have you, had a lot of fun designing all these characters and all these sets. I'm looking at Muffy's room right now, and she's got this crazy room with all these dioramas for all the World Girls, and there's tons to look at in the background. This is all to say, I've had quite a few things to say about this episode. This is all to say that I totally see what people are saying when they color this as one of their favorite episodes. I'm not ready to say it's one of my all-time favorites, but boy howdy, I would, and this is not to spoil our top 5 at the end of the season, but my word is this a highlight of the season. I would say, an Arthur episode special when I'm bringing up Grandpa Dave's Old Country Farm.
Yeah.
So I would say that kind of comparison speaks for itself.
That's hallowed ground right there. Yeah, and I'm really interested because it's a type of message that I think is a tough one to sell to a younger audience because, just simply put, not a lot of kids have that kind of level of critical thinking or like kind of large-scale thinking at that point. So I'm curious if it became people's favorites when they saw it for the first time, or as they got older. I could totally see a YouTube video being made out of this, of just like the time that Arthur was like radical left or whatever.
So this is the thing too, is like, are we only perceiving it as radical left because kind of this is the lens that me and you look at the world with, right? Like,
yeah.
I could see someone having this be their favorite episode, and it's because the art is so good.
Yeah.
Just because they liked seeing all the dolls, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
Just because American Girls were popular, and they kind of liked seeing this trend portrayed on Arthur. But that aside, I think the fact that it is ambiguous in that way is what makes it an effective and interesting episode.
Agreed. And my final thing on this is that the Arthur writers have always shown that they have a very, like, unlike other, like, I guess, my first thing I think of is the WWE, who are constantly behind the culture. The Arthur writers always seem to be very much, if not on the pulse, at least close to kind of what is popular, what is being talked about. And so, like, the American Girl dolls have, of course, been around for a long time, and they made a very good, like, parody / pastiche of what that is, just kind of like they did with Woogles, which I think was a really good takeoff on, like, the type of stupid 90s toys that everybody collected. So they seem to really know what they're talking about, and it helps the overall message of the show. Okay, man, whoa, we had a lot to talk about there, and I'm glad that we did, and it certainly was built up to us, and I think filled what we kind of exceeded expectations in a way. And I'm glad that we got to talk about that long form. So we'll just quickly run down what you can expect from us. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Elwood City Limits. Of course, next week is our Patreon-exclusive podcast for the kids. We're going to be talking about Between the Lions, which is another long-anticipated show for listeners and patrons to get us to talk about. So that's what we will be discussing. Of course, patrons, if you have any episode recommendations for Between the Lions, let us know in the Discord. In 2 weeks, we will be talking about the Season 10 finale, and that includes the stories What's Cooking and Buster's Special Delivery. Season 10 is almost in the rearview mirror, and not long after that, we will be talking about our favorite episodes of the season and general impressions. So, it's going to be, we're going to keep bringing you the content as Halloween gets closer. And, of course, reveling in scary movies and scary media and everything to be done with it. And, of course, there's no greater horror than the capitalistic regime we live under. We'll see if that gets us any bad reviews from any right-leaning listeners. But, of course, we all mean it in fun. Thank you again for joining us, and we really hope that you have a great week ahead of you. My name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini...
Wow, I'm flexible.
We'll see you next time.